Hello everyone. Thought it would be worthwhile to do an analysis of the incident that occurred at the Astroworld Music Festival in Houston, Texas on November 5th of 2021. As a disclaimer, I'm not a public official working in that area and the investigation regarding this incident is still ongoing, so most of what I'm discussing here is speculation on possible causes of the incident. A little bit of information on myself and how my background relates to this particular incident. I've been licensed as an EMT in South Carolina for about 4 years now. I also hold a diploma in sleep medicine technology, also called polysomnography. I started out my undergrad in psychology, after which I worked in a psychiatric hospital for 2 years, and I also have a little bit of experience working in private security. So here's the timeline of events. The incident started not long after 9 p.m. on Friday night when singer and rapper Travis Scott came on stage to play his set at the festival, and he was also accompanied by the rapper Drake for part of the incident. There were about 700 security and law enforcement officers present at the event, with about 50,000 attendees in total. According to the Houston Fire Department, which is also responsible for 911 ambulances in the city, a crowd surge occurred, meaning that a very large number of people all rushed towards the stage at once. The crowd surge reportedly caused a number of people to be physically injured by being crushed, among others who supposedly suffered respiratory distress due to being unable to expand their chest in order to breathe, as a result of how dense the crowd was. There's also been some speculation about individuals being trampled during the surge, although to my knowledge neither the Houston Fire Department nor Houston PD have confirmed trampling that occurred during the crowd surge. It also would not surprise me if some of the injuries at the event occurred due to the quality of the music being so poor that it caused severe, widespread eardrum damage. The Sun reported that EMS transported 17 individuals to the hospital, with 11 of those individuals being in cardiac arrest, meaning that their heart and lungs had stopped functioning properly, so CPR with a number of different interventions was in progress in an attempt to revive the individuals. As of making this video, there are 8 reported fatalities, with speculation that hundreds of individuals were injured during the incident. Information regarding autopsies has not been released as of now. Despite the crowd surge occurring and there being various security and emergency personnel providing care during the performance, it took about 45 minutes for the performers on stage to halt the performance. The rest of the festival ended up being canceled entirely. A number of people have been interviewed and reported that individuals were injured by the crushing while others passed out and fell to the ground due to being unable to breathe. So for my analysis, the big question is, what on earth happened here? At first glance, this event seems bizarre and largely unexplained. The incident that occurred at Astroworld is what, in the emergency services world, would be called a mass casualty incident, or MCI for short. An MCI is generally where you have multiple individuals who have been harmed and require care, with a minimum number of patients and other criteria to qualify as an MCI, varying depending on the geographic location. The cause of an MCI is typically obvious when it happens or becomes obvious quickly after. They're usually due to events such as shootings, motor vehicle accidents, hazardous materials leaks, explosions, building collapse, natural disasters, and the like. Most all of those are fairly clear once they happen. The only one of those events that tends to be a bit less obvious is a hazardous materials leak, because a number of individuals are seen collapsing or lying on the ground, and the individuals who woke up to help inhale the hazardous materials, resulting in them also being rendered unconscious or dead. Most other types of MCIs rarely appear to be unexplained. At the time I'm recording this video, the only other fact of interest regarding this incident, and a fact that casts suspicion on the entire thing, is that a security officer was believed to have been drugged. While attempting to physically detain an unruly attendant of the concert, the officer reported feeling a prick on his neck, after which he lost consciousness. The officer was treated with Narcan, a drug that can reverse the effects of an overdose on opioid drugs, which is a class of highly addictive painkillers, including morphine, heroin, oxycontin, and fentanyl. In EMS and emergency medicine, it is a drug that is used on a daily basis because so many people are ODing on opioids, whether it's an intentional suicide attempt or an accidental OD due to the user not knowing what all was included in what they got from a dealer. After being treated with Narcan, the officer woke up and reported what he experienced. The mark of what appeared to be a needle prick was observed on the officer's neck. Based on the officer's report of feeling as if his neck was pricked before he went unconscious, combined with the fact that the officer was brought back to consciousness by the use of Narcan, these facts indicate with almost absolute certainty that the officer experienced an opioid overdose, and here's why. There are receptors in the brain called opioid receptors, which is what opioids, whether they are naturally made or synthetic, bind to. When excess amounts of these drugs bind to the opioid receptors, the resulting effect is typically unconsciousness combined with breathing that is too slow and too shallow to oxygenate the body, eventually resulting in the heart stopping and the individual dying. Narcan molecules reverse the effect of these overdoses by essentially pushing the molecules of whatever drug the individual has OD'd on out of the way and binding with the opioid receptors instead of the opioid drug. Narcan, when binding with these receptors, does not result in unconsciousness and respiratory depression like opioid drugs do. Excess amounts of Narcan cannot reverse the effects of any drugs that do not bind with the opioid receptors. Based on the fact that the officer woke up once he was Narcaned, there had to have been an opioid or opioid-like drug in his system, and based on his report of being pricked, he was most likely injected with an opioid from a syringe. Given that an official cause of the crowd surge has not been released yet, combined with the fact that a security officer who was trying to intervene in some of the chaos was drugged, it may seem to many that perhaps something nefarious was occurring. At first glance, it did appear that way to me. I'm a huge metalhead, have been ever since I was probably 10 or 11 years old. I like almost every genre and subgenre of metal and rock. I've seen hundreds of bands live. I've been to concerts in small and medium-sized venues. I've been to concerts in huge arenas. I've been to concerts that were held outside. Some of these concerts were shoulder to shoulder and elbow to elbow. Probably 80% of the shows I've been to featured at least one metal band, and most of these shows involved moshing, i.e. slamming into each other and basically beating the crap out of each other for fun while the band plays. Despite moshing many times and observing mosh pits on many occasions, I've never seen any significant injury related to moshing. Minor injuries, sure, but nothing that was even close to constituting an emergency. Having worked for EMS and in the emergency department, I've never treated or transported a patient who was injured by moshing at a concert. At some of these concerts, there were hundreds to tens of thousands of people present, so many other people have had the same experience as myself of the injury rate at concerts being fairly low. We were moshing in very densely populated spaces with virtually no injuries. So going back to the cause of this incident, what happened and why? Was it a freak accident or was there something criminal going on here? In addition to the information we have about the incident itself, we also know that there were a lot of unruly attendees entering the gates before Travis Scott started his set. In other words, the behavior didn't start with Mr. Scott going on stage that night. There were many individuals that were running inside in something of a stampede, neglecting to follow the proper check-in procedures with their tickets. Many of them were detained and arrested following this chaotic behavior. When a performer goes on stage at a concert, especially if it is one of the headlining acts, lots of attendees try to get as close to the stage as possible. We know that before Mr. Scott went on stage, many of the festival goers were already acting way out of line, trying to rush through the gates and into the festival. Based on all these facts, it only makes sense that once Mr. Scott got up on stage, an unruly group of concert goers all decided to try to get as close to the stage as they could, as fast as they could, without any regard for how anyone could be injured. A lot of well-behaved people were stuck in the middle of the rampage and were collectively pushed towards and into the stage by the rowdy attendees who would not let up despite the fact they were physically crushing the individuals in front of them and around them. There have been other incidents in the past where crowd surges cause injuries for similar reasons, such as at a performance by The Who in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1979, where 11 people were killed. Based on the facts I have in front of me, I would say that this was an accident caused by a large number of irresponsible and disorderly people versus some type of planned nefarious attack. Even with all these facts in mind, there are two questions remaining. What caused the crowd surge at this specific concert versus others, and how does the officer that was drugged play into this situation if there was no planned attack? I'll deal with the drugged officer first. It's no secret that people at big concerts do drugs. Over the years, I've noticed a lot of people use drugs, especially younger people at concerts that did not have any type of religious undertone. I've observed people smoke cannabis, snort cocaine, and inject liquid substances, most likely heroin, into their veins. Given that the crowd surge occurred suddenly, I think the most likely explanation is that someone had a syringe with an uncapped needle in their possession that was filled with a drug for personal or perhaps even medicinal use, and when the chaos started, the individual accidentally stuck the officer with the needle. It's also within the realm of possibility that the individual possessing the syringe was a friend or associate of the individual whom the officer was detaining and used the drug to sedate the officer in order to physically stop the detainment from happening. There have been no reports of any other officers who were injured or drugged during this incident. Overall, I think the chance of this being a coordinated attack that involved the drugging of officers is very low, and that it was more likely a series of unfortunate accidents that occurred due to neglectful behavior. Again, my conclusion is speculation because there are still facts that haven't come out, but based on the facts we do have, I think the aforementioned explanation is the most probable one. How about in regards to what caused the crowd surge in the first place? While COVID restrictions have been lessened in many places, or like in South Carolina, where I live, have been eradicated entirely except for in hospitals and in healthcare establishments, this festival was likely the first concert and large event that many of the individuals in attendance had been to in a while. They likely felt that they were breaking free from being cooped up due to this horrible virus that has plagued the world since early 2020, and so they were far more excitable and less observant of safety than they would have been otherwise. Take the following analogy. Let's say you've been in prison for 10 years and you were just let out, and upon being released you were given the opportunity to drive a Bugatti. A Bugatti, of course, is an extremely powerful car that has 1,200 horsepower and can go up to 273 miles per hour, which is about 439 kilometers per hour. You would be excited to drive such an expensive and extraordinary car in the first place, but given that you've been locked up and haven't driven anything for a long time, much less a Bugatti, the chances that your driving might get out of control, that you might ignore traffic laws, and that you might disregard safety overall is much higher. The result of a crash is much higher when presented with these circumstances than if you were already driving on a regular basis. Something that I noticed when I wrote the script for this video and recorded it, something that I neglected to mention, was that Travis Scott failed to stop the concert despite the fact that there were obvious injuries in the crowd, that bad things were happening, and despite the fact that there were ambulances that were coming into the crowd and were actively providing care to injured patients as well as performing CPR on some of the individuals who were eventually transported to the hospital, some of which died. This doesn't speak very well about Travis Scott's moral or ethical values, and for me, the fact that all that's going on and he's just not even quitting, after it's been going on for 45 minutes is indicative of, in my opinion, that seems very, very narcissistic. It's like, yeah, I'm going to keep the spotlight on me, despite the fact that there's, at this point, estimated 300 people who have been injured, and 10 deaths at this point. I find that very, very problematic from a moral and ethical perspective. This video has been my analysis of the Astroworld and Travis Scott concert incident. What I've said here is speculation, since there are a lot of facts that still have yet to come out, so I may be right, or there could be areas where I'm wrong, but I still wanted to try and give my 2 cents on what happened here. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.